It's a magical duel that's been going on for decades. A battle between good and evil, or maybe just evil and evil, or maybe just kind of dumb and dumb. Of course, I am talking about Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. And let's get into why their feud is so particularly, absolutely crazy. Hey everybody, this is Perch. I like to examine kind of the history behind things, and so I started digging into the Grant Morrison Alan Moore feud, which I was surprised to learn a lot of people don't even know was really going on. But I think in terms of all the feuds that have happened, and most of comic feuds are known for being petty. I think that's the one word you could pretty much sum up almost all of them. They tend to be petty. They tend to have very petty outcomes. They have very petty shots at each other. The irony of people, of kind of the current, fans of comics who are angry at comics and creators in comics and kind of that pissing war back and forth, is that comics, this is not a new thing. I think what Tess Fowler was coming out like, your comics used to be relatively peaceful until, Twitter and the alt-right got involved. It's like, okay, let me tell you about the wizard war of Alan Moore and Grant Morrison. So piecing through exactly what's been said and where it will lead you down a absolutely insane path. What we do know is that Grant Morrison considers himself kind of a practitioner of chaos magic, and he actually, well, it's hard to say. Grant Morrison, I think, so by the way, let me just, I'm interrupting myself multiple times. I will say Alan Moore and Grant Morrison have both written pretty amazing pieces of work. Both are very, very important to comics. Alan Moore, of course, with V for Vendetta, Watchmen, Swamp Thing. He's written some pretty amazing work. He's also made it absolutely a mission to piss off everyone in comics by calling them dumb, calling them he believes everyone has stolen from him. This comes important in a few minutes. You'll see why. But this has been Alan Moore's pitch. Alan Moore worships a crazy snake god. Yes, you did actually hear that correctly. He worships a snake god, Glycon, I guess. It's an ancient snake god, has had a kind of high, big influence on his kind of occult powers that Alan Moore believes that he has. He's by and large out of comics at this point. He looks like hell. And he's turned into kind of cranky old man, which in fairness is a profession many people in comics seem to have. It's actually interesting to note at this point that Alan Moore was born in 1953. Grant Morrison was born in 1960. If you look at the two together, I would say that Grant Morrison's aging magic is definitely working a lot better than Alan Moore, who's got crazy beard syndrome and just looks very weird. Anyway, no stones at glass houses. It is what it is. So Grant Morrison, meanwhile, has been, came along a little bit later in comics. He's written The Invisibles. He's written, big run in Batman, the X-Men. Is currently writing Green Lantern, and Grant Morrison, I think, is certainly very self-confident. Both men have a lot of ego. Both men believe they are not only the best comic writers, and kind of to some extent the world revolves around them. They're both incredibly arrogant if you piece it out. And they also are arrogant about their magic powers. They both believe they are the stronger wizard and the more powerful occult writer, and their creativity stems through that mystical flow that both of them tap into. At any rate, Grant Morrison, so who's to blame? How'd this feud get started? Well, it's a little bit hard to tell, but Grant Morrison originally back in the 80s would say a lot of very positive things about Alan Moore. And even into the kind of the early 90s, Grant Morrison was very complimentary to Alan Moore and would even call Alan Moore kind of an influence in his life, and that he is, he was very influential in his time. And then as Grant Morrison got older, that tone kind of shifted a little bit to, Alan Moore wasn't that big an influence, and maybe Alan Moore's a little jealous of him, and he doesn't really think so. And then it seemed to tip into a deeper decline of, Alan Moore is a big liar, and Alan Moore wrote one Watchmen, but he wrote dozens. He writes. Well, I think his exact quote was, Alan Moore had one Watchman in his career, and Grant Morrison does a Watchman a week, which is a pretty ballsy thing to say, particularly since Morrison did one of the kind of Watchmen ripoff titles, and then proceeded to ape Alan Moore's style. Alan Moore in Watchmen had the classic 9-panel grid. Pax Americana had the 4x4, the the 12-panel grid. Sorry, I can't do math today. The 16-panel grid, and it was definitely in both of. And then he was saying this is better magic than what Alan Moore did, and it was a way to kind of just screw with Alan Moore, who was pissed off about DC doing additional Watchmen universe comics anyway. So it's all a bunch of nonsense here. So this has been their kind of feud. Now, to his part, we'll keep bouncing back and forth. Alan Moore seemed to kind of fly under the radar, or Grant Morrison seemed to fly under the radar of Alan Moore. And then as Alan Moore started to, I would say, fall out of love of comics, or kind of get out of comics, Alan Moore started to make more and more comments that Grant Morrison not only stole from him, that in fact his quote was that he's read Grant Morrison's work exactly twice, once when Alan Moore, wrote it, and then once when Grant Morrison copied it, which again is in the creative circles is a pretty dick thing to say as well. So Alan Moore started saying more and more and more things about how Grant Morrison was a jerk, and Alan Moore said that he actually is super pissed because he's responsible for getting Grant Morrison his job at Vertigo. That he actually, called Karen Berger. Karen Berger was running Vertigo at the time, and that Alan Moore basically said, if it wasn't for me, Grant Morrison would have never gotten work. So it's my basically I was the one who did this magnanimous thing and got Grant Morrison his job, and then Grant Morrison proceeded to rip me off and steal all my work and my storylines and my ideas. And this story has the timing doesn't quite work. If you do the dates of kind of when these things happened, and the imprint Vertigo happened in '93. Alan Moore had very much fallen out of DC. He had quit. He had started to call them mean names, and he was very much against DC at that point. Whereas at that time, Morrison had started to do some work with Doom Patrol and Arkham Asylum, some other things. And so this idea that Alan Moore, who had fallen out of DC, would call up Karen Berger and say, "Oh, you should do some work with Morrison," that doesn't line up. Like, if you had fallen out of line with a company, why would you then call the company and recommend somebody? Why would they take your advice, since you'd been calling them? I think the quote was pig fuckers. Why would you? This doesn't completely make sense. It sounds a little bit like Moore, who, by the way, another reason why this doesn't quite wash is that Moore has said that he is responsible for all kinds of people. I think Peter Milligan, various people within comics, Alan Moore had credited himself as being responsible for their careers. Mark Miller as well was in there. As he wanders in and out of this feud from time to time. But we're not going to bring him into it just yet, or probably not in this video. So the two have gone back and forth. Now, here's the interesting part: is Moore said, "I am a rebel, an independent comic maker. Nobody's going to tell me what to do." And by and large, he made good on that promise. He did his own comics. He then proceeded to scream at his former employers, call them names, invoke the snake god Glyson on them, and do various kind of occult witchcraftery to go after them, and then he stopped working for them. Morrison portrayed himself as being a rebel, a chaos magic occultant who doesn't answer to anybody, but then would also go on to do things like Final Crisis and Batman and X-Men. So, I mean, he did plenty of work for the big two. He posed for various pictures, like I think he did a thing with Rolling Stone where he had on his fancy outfit, and he's got lighting, and it's in black and white. He's got a suit on, and he's doing kind of a magic, like I'm levitating a pin between my hands, everybody's seen that one. Whereas Alan Moore's pictures look like somebody like snuck into the basement and then surprised him while he was, getting ready to sacrifice a chicken. And Moore's turning to look at the camera like, I'm going to kill you. Who knows? I mean, I'm not the photographer, so who knows exactly what was going on between the two. But I think, definitely Alan Moore wins points for being the true rebel, and Grant Morrison wins. He loses out on that a little bit. He's a little bit too corporate. You can't be both. I am corporate, and oh, by the way, I've also designed these stylized images of me, and kind of wrote myself into a comic. What is curious about all of this is both individuals at various times have talked about how comics and the pages and what they put on the page is part of their magic witchcraftery that has allowed kind of the occult powers to generate through the page and through the panels. Now, who knows? This video gets posted, and tomorrow it's revealed that I have been, a satellite has fallen down in the sky, crushed me, and sent me into an alternate dimension ruled by a bat god. Well, you'll know that I was wrong. But kind of look closely at whatever happens to me. If it's like a snake god that gets me, or a bat god that gets me, or some kind of weird multiverse triangulation of reality, you'll kind of know who did me in. And then find that person and buy them a beer. So this feud continues. Now, by and large, both individuals have kind of resorted, particularly over the last 10 years, to just kind of peeing on each other in public at various times. Both Again, remember, Grant Morrison was extremely complimentary of Alan Moore. Alan Moore wasn't really complimentary of anyone, but the cold arms race of their feud has escalated over the years to various insults. The big insults, as opposed to, say, like what John Byrne does of blowing up Jim Shooter's town, these two both have chosen to insult by accusing the other of plagiarism, by saying that their ideas are shallow and poor, their magic is weak, and that they're certainly not gaining proper favor with their deity or whatever they're involved in. This is a very different kind of feud. Again, both have created amazing comics. I think everything they both have done really, really impressive things, and both clearly think about their work. That said, both also seem to be dicks. Both are very, very arrogant. And I guess if you do a lot of work, a lot of people in comics and writers kind of become this way. I miss the Neil Gaiman in the 80s a lot more than the Neil Gaiman we have today. I think the Neil Gaiman in the 80s was a lot more humble. But when you're successful, then you don't have to necessarily be humble, I suppose. These two are definitely not humble by any stretch of the imagination. And on top of that, they're bringing in their various witchcraft snake goddery into things, at some point they're going to have a wizard's duel. I guess. It's hard to say. Very, very strange. So, how do you rule in favor of this feud? Well, I think the ruling is both are crazy. Both are really accomplished, great writers. The claims both have had about each other feel a lot more like jealousy and a lot less like any real meat to the bone. I think it's undoubtable that Morrison was influenced by some of Moore, but it's also, you can't argue that Morrison has also forged many of his own paths. He is a different storyteller, a different writer, and lots of people are influenced by lots of people. Alan Moore is certainly influenced by a great number of writers and things as well. Alan Moore himself has said that he was influenced by people like Stephen King and Frank Miller, William Burroughs, Harlan Ellison, many people. And you can see that in his work. I think that he really, really loved Eisner and Kurtzman a lot. He loved the spirit. He loved seeing that kind of stuff. He did like Steve Ditko's work. So, more everybody has influences, and you don't see, for obvious reasons, you don't see Eisner running around saying Alan Moore ripped him off. So, at some point, comic creators just have to acknowledge the fact that they all stand on the shoulders of somebody, and trying to pretend like you're your own giant just makes you kind of a douchebag. And while I think two things can be true at once, and if I can summarize anything by the Alan Moore Grant Morrison feud, it's that it's possible to be both a very clever, very amazing, very inventive writer and an arrogant douchebag at the same time. And both these individuals seem to fit that bill pretty damn well. Anyway, I'm sure the problem with talking about this feud is there are a million stories. We're at 15 minutes now, and I can go on for another hour on crazy things both have said. I think the key that I just tried to sum up here is just picture two grown men, 7 years apart, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around, both who believe they are secret wizards, and both that, for whatever reason, has decided that the other is a jerk and they want to just make little passive aggressive comments from time to time at them. These are usually the kind of individuals where you always, at least for me, I like some Comic Con to just set up the octagon and put both of them in there, and it's like fight. And if you can, you can bring your wizard staff. If you can summon magical mystical snakes to do your fighting for you, that's all part of the show. Be my guest. But otherwise, two will enter, one will leave. I think that's where we're at with this feud. Leave me a comment below. Let me know your stories, things you've heard about these two. Aren't comics weird? I think it certainly puts into perspective things like Tess Fowler doesn't like Sean Gordon Murphy, or this creator doesn't like that creator. The whole every time people really get going, like the Donny Cates versus Ethan Van Sciver kind of battle back and forth. I think, or even more so, like just the crowdfunder, like the Doug TenNapel versus Ethan Van Sciver, that feud. I can't take it too seriously because we also have two wizard occultist snake god worshippers going at each other with a 50-year career in comics. That's a feud, my friends. I mean, who had the best packaging for their Indiegogo? I mean, okay, but snake gods. I'm just saying, you can't compete with snake gods. Leave me a comment below, like, subscribe, do your thing, whatever you'd like to do. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch and suggest other feuds, and I'll look into them. But most importantly, thanks for listening.